Hello, I'm Charlie Worsham, your host for Mississippi on the Map, a podcast brought to you by Visit Mississippi. This podcast explores why Mississippi is the birthplace of America's music. Well, welcome Dan Rogers, Jordan Pettit, my friends from the Grand Ole Opry, to Mississippi on the Map podcast. Jordan, we're both Mississippians. We both grew up in the orbit of the Air Castle of the South and the famous Grand Ole Opry broadcast. You're from Olive Branch.
Olive Branch, yeah. My mom's side of the family's from Olive Branch, which is where I grew up. And we spent a lot of time down in Kosciuszko, where my dad's side of the family was. My dad was from Kosciuszko. So definitely got the full spectrum. By Kosciuszko standards, Olive Branch is the city.
Of course.
So I got to see both sides of it. Yeah.
I remember going to a bluegrass competition in Kosciuszko, backed up by a guy named Tiny, whose hat was about as big as he was. And I think I took second place in the mandolin and first place in the banjo and third place in the fiddle. And for a kid, it was a pretty good little haul of cash right there. Probably had $150 at the end of that day. Well, Dan Rogers, I'm so glad to have you as well here, general manager. Well, what would your official title be?
Official title, executive producer, but you can call me whatever you want.
Okay. Our fearless leader at the Grand Ole Opry. And now you didn't grow up in Mississippi, but you grew up in rural Illinois.
Illinois, yeah.
On a farm.
Outside of Xenia, Illinois, population 380. But we do have in common that while I was listening to the Grand Ole Opry up north, as you will, you're all about probably equidistant from the Opry in another direction.
That's right. And that kind of leads me to the first question I wanted to ask both of you, which is, here we are in the 100th year of the Grand Ole Opry. I was proud to be at the Ryman for the first show of the Opry's 100th year. And y'all have just had Ringo Starr on the show. I want to ask about that in a minute. But we all have deep ties to the Opry as fans. And I feel like the pull of the Opry is part of what led us to Nashville eventually. And for me, that tie goes all the way back to Tallahatchie County, my mom's grandfather, my great-grandfather, who built out of planks from his own sawmill a homemade piece of furniture specifically built just to hold his Opry radio. And that was his whole week revolved around Saturday night in the Opry. I'd love to hear from each of you. Maybe, Dan, you could kick us off, but just to the power of the Opry and how it it's been sort of that first window into a bigger world for rural America now for a century.
Well, I can speak from my heart and my experience that was the case for me. I'm an only child, and man, my greatest memories, greatest experiences with my parents were with country music and truly the Opry. It was on a pedestal, you know. I remember specific broadcasts and just how excited we would all get to come to the Opry about every other year or so, depending, truly, not to sound like a farmer son, but depending on how the crops were, et cetera, how they were looking in mid-July, was a good indication if we'd be at the Grand Ole Opry in August or so. But we tuned in so often, and I think I tuned in as a little kid, probably a little more than my parents, maybe.
I love it. Jordan, what about you?
For me, the stories that come to mind the most are my grandparents from Kosciuszko, my mamaw and my papaw. They had a little country grocery store on a 2-lane highway just outside of Kosciuszko, and the store was in the front. Their house was in the back. They had a little small, I guess you'd call it a living room. It was kind of all with the kitchen and the everything there. But they had this big TV that was deeper than it was wide sitting on the floor. And it was like a big deal, but it was like kind of in a walnut, wooden
I remember
case.
Those and my grandparents.
And it was like, man, that TV is awesome. And I just remember watching with them the Grand Ole Opry on TV. Again, when I was in these ages, it would have probably been late 80s, early 90s. And it was either the Grand Ole Opry or it was the Lawrence Welk Show.
Yeah.
So those were the two things.
Yeah.
And my mamaw was sang in the choir at the local Baptist church, and so it was just music was always kind of in the vicinity. So much so that we actually celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary at the Grand Ole Opry. So that was an epic family trip to Nashville.
They get a shout out from the announcer that night?
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I don't remember if they did or didn't, but yeah,
You didn't know people at the Opry at that
You didn't have a way to pull some inside.
And I need to
there.
interject just long enough to say my dad still has that television upstairs in our farmhouse.
That's awesome.
And it still works.
Amazing. Well, you mentioned the store in front and the home and back, and tell me about the first thing we bonded over when we first met in our early days at Warner together. Of course, I'm talking about gas station fried chicken, one of the delicacies to come out of Mississippi.
And I remember the conversation going like this because you were from Grenada, and when we would travel from Olive Branch to Kosciuszko, we would get off on the Vaden exit off of 55, and there was a Stuckey's right there off the they had Stuckey's was this gas station. I don't know if they existed out of Mississippi or not, but you could get the pecan divinity and your peanut brittle and peanuts and just anything else you wanted there. So I remember us talking specific, and your mother for sure talking about that particular Stuckey's off that Vaden exit. So, and yes, gas station chicken. Big
one of
deal.
the finer things in life there.
Big deal. We had a Dodge's store in Olive Branch, and many a chicken strip and a JoJo potato was eaten in that gas station.
Yeah, I love it. Now tell me a little bit about Opryland, because I know for my family when I was growing up, it was a regular thing. Every few years we'd come to Nashville. Of course, go downtown, see the Ryman, see Ernst Tubb Record Shop, but we would always spend a day or two at Opryland Theme Park, and we would always end the day by going to the Opry. Did y'all ever make it to Opryland in your days growing up? Or
I certainly did. I have fond memories of the Opryland theme park. In fact, as far as artists that I've seen there perform, I remember seeing Vince Gill play a little amphitheater there early in his career. Well, I say it was early. It might have been a little further into his career by his standards, but he was still kind of a new artist in my mind. And then Mike Snyder, who we saw, throwing out some jokes.
the fur coat song. That's the reason I'm here today, was seeing Mike Snyder at Opryland play the banjo.
Which, talking about chicken, he had a chicken nugget joke. That was my favorite joke as a kid. But I think I told him one time, I was like, Mike, I saw you at Opryland many years ago. I was probably 10 years old. And you were selling all of your cassette tapes. It was like 6 of them for $30. He was like, $30? He was like, no, it wasn't. It was like 6 for $15. I was like, well, okay.
Yeah.
Either way, that was road trip material for us.
Yes.
For many years after that.
First of all, I bet there are also people who didn't come to Nashville after having watched Mike Snyder at Opryland. Maybe they're like, I think New York is more for me. But yes, the Rogers family loved a good trip to Opryland, and I'm old enough that I remember, like, it was a production. We'd go to Opryland one day, but there was another day because like we'd never know when we were going to come, so we couldn't order tickets by mail ahead of time. So we had to get up on like a Wednesday and go stand in line at the box office at Opryland to try to get tickets to the Opry like that Saturday night.
Yeah.
And my dad always wanted to get the 9:30 show in hopes that maybe Marty Robbins would show up, because Marty Robbins was his favorite. And it happened every once in a while. It was great. Those are priceless memories for me.
Gosh, another Nashville attraction tied to Mississippi, actually, that's no longer here would be Twitty City.
Absolutely.
Twitty from Mississippi. Well, talking about Opryland, one of the favorite things I remember from my experiences there was that so many of the Opry stars could be found walking around Opryland. And I specifically remember seeing Johnny Russell just sitting on a park bench at Opryland and being starstruck. It was one of the first times I was ever starstruck because I made that connection, wow, this guy's from where I'm from.
Right.
And I knew he had written a song that the Beatles had sang, which is Act Naturally. Of course, Buck Owens made it famous too, but nobody made it as famous as Ringo Starr, a recent Opry debut
How cool
artist.
is that?
Tell me a little bit about that, because that just happened.
Yeah, that was just a few days ago and was just phenomenal. And for me, it was one of those things that, man, we're in the middle of so much stuff happening that you knew it was going to be exciting and great and you wanted to make the most of it. But also it was just like, well, let's get this done because we have these other 10 things waiting. And then when the night rolled around, and really it wasn't until he was on stage that I was just mesmerized. And I'll tell you, the thing I will always remember and remember the most are the looks on the folks' faces who had sang with him as they came off stage. It was like, usually people are thrilled to be having just played the Opry, but man, it was like they had been a part of something that they weren't expecting to be that cool,
Yeah.
And Too Slim from Riders in the Sky sent the greatest voice message the next day. That was just kind of put it all in perspective about how he would have never dreamt that when he sat down and listened to Sgt. Pepper, that one day, decades later, he'd get to sing with that guy who was influencing him so much.
And being in Riders in the Sky, his outfit wasn't that far off from a Sergeant Pepper uniform.
It may have been in.
Yeah.
That may have been an inspiration for one of the
Best dressed group in country music.
For sure. Well, the fabulous superlatives are up there too, but I can't disagree. So I have to ask if Ringo did sing that famous Johnny Russell song.
Absolutely. And it was great. It was just awesome. And I'll say this place is just so phenomenal. I also love that Johnny Russell's son came in for that night and just wanted to talk to Ringo for a second about how that came to be. And they had that conversation themselves. So
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what was said, but I know that's something that he had a conversation he had wanted to have forever. And I love that it took place at the Opry. And you're right. His dad was second to none.
Can y'all see me all right? I remember he'd say every time he'd walk out. So much of the Opry magic happens on stage, but also half the magic is backstage. And it's the camaraderie, it's the telling of jokes. And when I think about all the great jokes I've heard in the hallways at the Opry, I can't help but look back and reflect on the history of comedians on that stage. Because unlike any other show on earth, the Opry, and I've got more questions about this, you are catering to an audience from 2 to 92, and you don't find square dancers and bluegrass bands and cutting-edge country music stars and comedians and everything else that you do all in one place within even just 1 half-hour segment like you do on the Opry. But I know Rod Brasfield from Smithville, Mississippi, was an early star of the Opry. And he has a connection. People may not recognize his name the way they would say Minnie Pearl, but Rod and Minnie Pearl actually shared a lot of history. Can you speak a little bit to that, and maybe perhaps something that were Minnie Pearl able to be here, like what that perspective would be on Rod Brasfield?
Yeah, I think that they were superstars of the Opry. When I was growing up, when you came to the Opry, you were hoping that Minnie Pearl was there because she was just this mythical figure. And until his death, they were kind of mythical figures together. And I've always appreciated that it was really important to Minnie, after being elected to the Country Music Hall of Fame, that Rod got in there too. And so she, made sure it was known that there'd probably not be a Minnie Pearl, or at least the Minnie Pearl level of fame that she reached, if not for Rod Brasfield. So it was exciting. I'm sure it was incredible day for her to get that information that that dream for her had come true.
Yeah. So Jordan, just before we started recording, and then again in the show, you mentioned cassette tapes and what we'd have to listen to on those drives from Mississippi up to Nashville, because I remember that fondly and the cassettes that we listened to. We had a pretty healthy collection of Jerry Clower cassettes. And I particularly remember my favorite Jerry Clower story and joke had something to do with the one of his main characters as a kid. Maybe it was him, I think. Yeah, it was when he was a kid, and he got in trouble for coming in the house and, yelling and causing a big scene, acting like he thought the dog that had come around the corner was a lion. And his mom sent him up to his room, said, "Now I want you to pray to God and think about what you said about causing all that ruckus about that lion, that dog looking like a lion." And so he goes up to his room, comes back down a little while later, and she said, "Well, did you talk to God?" And he said, "Yes, and God said he thought that dog was a lion too." But man, there's just nobody quite like Jerry Clower, the mouth of the South, from Liberty, Mississippi. And I'm just curious if you ever had any connections with him. And I think you might have some too, Dan.
I mean, it was definitely road trip material for my family growing up. It's been a while since I've listened, so I'd have to go back and find my favorite Jerry Clower jokes. But I also had an offensive line coach at Vanderbilt named Robbie Caldwell, who went on and became assistant head coach at Clemson after that. But he was a huge Jerry Clower fan. And it was just, I just think funny memories of him telling us those jokes over and over and over again.
I remember a friend in one of those stories that had gone up to Chicago, and it was so cold, he said he slept between the mattresses. But, I neglected to mention, you have a former life as a football player, which I somehow am one of the only people to leave Mississippi without a biblical understanding of football and some form of skills in the athletic department, but you've got the goods.
Well, that's what got me to Nashville. Came up on scholarship to Vanderbilt in '99 and played there for 4 years. And my career came to an end with an injury. But in the midst of all of that, I interned with Sony Music, and I'd come across some really great songwriters in my time there that just really inspired me to pursue music as a career. And Vanderbilt didn't have a music business like music business major or anything like that. So I had some really great mentors in my time there that, some people say you don't choose the music business chooses you.
Yeah.
And for me, it was like my time at Vanderbilt was a lot of time was spent walking across West End Avenue to Tower Records and just putting headphones on and trying to listen to as much music as I could for the 2 hours I had in between classes. Or there was a place called CD Warehouse over on 21st Avenue, and I'd do the same thing there. And when I interned, which was really just by happenstance, I saw a lot of people that were making a living around music, getting to do, just do whatever aspect of the business they did to support creators, support the artwork. And I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. And I never looked back from that. So when my career played out the way that it did, my football career, and I couldn't play anymore, I coached for a couple years, and then I had an opportunity to come to Columbia Records in my first job. And the rest was history. I spent 15 years working for record labels, spent a couple years doing my own thing, kind of created a business, and then had the opportunity to talk to the Opry about a job a little over 7 years ago. So, and here I've been ever since.
It was right here in the Mississippi Delta where more than 100 years ago, black sharecroppers and laborers gave America its own musical identity. Drawing on the sounds and traditions of their native Africa and the struggle of their American experience, the blues was born. This land was the epicenter of musical creativity, offering Saturday night liberation and salvation. on Sunday morning. The sounds of Mississippi gave rise to gospel, gave country music its twang, gave R&B its soul, jazz its blue note, and rock and roll its king. If you love music, there's no better place to discover its roots and its future than in Mississippi, the birthplace of America's music.
So in all that time, is there a moment you recall where you felt most proud to be from Mississippi?
Wow. I was early in my career. I remember starkly getting to meet Charley Pride backstage at Bridgestone Arena. WKDF, the radio station in town, was doing one of their big birthday bash shows there, and Charley was on it. And there were shared dressing rooms, and I was working with an artist named Buddy Jewell at the time at Columbia. And he was sharing a dressing room with Charley Pride, and his son Dion was there with him. And I just remember that was one of, not the first, but one of the first in my mind, big stars I got to meet. And I'll never forget shaking his hand and just his grip and just like, man, I just met Charley Pride, you know? Of course, later on, I got to see Charley a number of times at the Opry in this role, but something about that first meeting was just like, wow, what an icon, So, that was a point of pride knowing that he's from Sledge, Mississippi. And, I got to work Randy Hauser, in my time at Universal South and Show Dog back in those days, and we had a great Mississippi bond on the road together. So that was a point of pride, seeing him have success in country music, knowing that we were from not that far apart from one another, and had a big blues connection with him. You know, so those are just a couple things on the business side that come to mind for me.
Yeah. Dan, I know Charley Pride is unparalleled as one of the most legendary Opry members of all time. Do you have any memories or?
Oh, Charley, so many. I will say the two things that strike me first and foremost are, one, how everybody else who was on the show that night, any night he was on, wanted to get a little time with him, and not from a, man, like I want an autograph or I've got to meet him. Just like they wanted to soak it all in, and that's everybody from people who had known him for decades to people who had just grown up with this music and wanted to spend time with him. He was like a magnet. He drew you in, and he was like, he'd look you in the eyes and he would talk to you. It was an incredible communication that he would have. And then the other thing I'll always remember is just it was like, I feel like it was equal parts reverence and excitement from the crowd when he would be introduced. And it was like, they would just be lifted off their feet when you heard that piano intro to Kiss an Angel Good Morning, and he would walk out all at the same time. It was just this, somebody hit the, let's take it up a notch button backstage.
An
It's
Opry
so
moment,
cool to see everybody just on their feet before he had even taken that microphone to sing. So,
and a story not unlike yours in that the sports was what originally got him on his way, and then of course he found his way in with music, which is pretty cool. So I can imagine how that would feel. Like, I got to meet Charley backstage, similar to you, at a CMA Fest event once. And yeah, he was just the most down-to-earth person, started telling me stories. It's almost like he sort of knew instinctively, like I was going to be asking him. So he just offered those stories. And I love the connection of Charley Pride to a Leaf, Mississippi native, Lloyd Green, one of the great steel guitarists of all time, who was band leader for Charley's landmark album In Person, which, for anybody listening, if you want to hear some great live country music on record, Charley Pride In Person with one of the great bands in all of country music history. It's worth checking out. Okay, Dan, before we started rolling, I heard that you've spent a little bit of time in Mississippi, and it sounds like the highlight so far was down in Philadelphia with our friend. We're all card-carrying members of his fan club, Mr. Marty Stewart.
We did. I that was just I don't know. It was almost like you opened a book and read about this experience we had where Marty invited us down just to see what he was doing in Philadelphia, which is so important to him. And it was no coincidence that he invited us on perhaps the best day you could ever invite anyone anywhere, when Dolly Parton had agreed to come play in the theater there for him. And
Ellis Theater,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
As a part of he's building basically a cultural center,
Yeah,
a museum,
Congress of Country Music.
Congress of Country Music. So Dolly Parton in Philadelphia, Mississippi, with Marty Stewart.
And the joy for me was obviously the show and seeing their love for each other and mutual respect, but also just how much the town loved the fact that Dolly Rebecca Parton was coming to town. You know, like it reminded me of like big days growing up, like shoe polish welcome Dolly on, you know, storefront windows.
Yeah.
And when we went out to the airport, there was a sign that said "Thank you, Dolly." Like, so the last thing she saw before she left may have been that, or as she left town. So it was just a great day, and gave me a even more appreciation for the for that town, for the state, and for Marty, who is so wise, so incredibly wise, and I think realized everybody has that common appreciation for where they came from, and everybody brings where they came from with them.
Yes.
And he has, you know, he's talked about how he brings Mississippi where he comes, but then also recognizes, like, and especially in the past at the Opry, like, that guy brought Texas, and Patsy Cline brought the hills of Virginia, you know, and
right.
like it's in their DNA. So
Connie Smith brought that West Virginia,
there
and I
you
bet
go.
that the crowd that day with Marty and Dolly probably felt a lot like it did to a young Marty when Connie Smith
I'm
visited
sure,
Philadelphia.
exactly.
You know, I think about someone I believe we've talked together about who, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think was from Mississippi, Les Leverett.
Was Les
that-
from Mississippi?
I think he might have
probably
been.
so. I know he was from south of. I just think it like Les was here so long in Nashville. I think of him as a native, but I bet you're right.
I'll have to do my homework on
I
that.
bet
but
you're right.
let's say he was. He and
I'm sure
Marty
he was.
share a history of capturing country music history through the lens of a camera. Les Leverett may not be a household name, but of course he took some of the most iconic photos in the history of country music.
And told some of the greatest stories you'll.
I was going to ask,
ever
did
hear.
you not go visit Les in his
I'm
older
so
years with
thankful that-
Marty, perhaps?
Yeah, Les. I'm really thankful that Les and I got to be great friends. We had, like, I admired his work for so long, and then we did an exhibit for of his work at the Opry, and got to know him. And man, it was like just those people that you meet that you think, if I can like find a way to spend more time with this person, I'll be a better person for it. So yeah, we did several times. We just try to go to lunch every once in a while, and I would bring special guests with me just to be able to like sit in his presence and hear those stories, and they were hardly ever repeated. You know, like some people have their 5 go-to stories. Man, like you could throw out a name and he remembered like a specific shoot, you know. I remember real quick, he like took 2 minutes, but to tell us the story of waking up to take that great Tom T. Hall photo on the cover of Homecoming. So if you haven't seen that, take a look at that and just think everything about that came to pass because like his vision for it, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing.
He's a good guy.
Okay, Jordan, you know that Dan has been to Philadelphia, so we can check that off the list. But let's say you get to take Dan to any one place in Mississippi. Where are you going to take him first, and why?
Oh man, what a question. I don't know. The first place that comes to mind is Oxford. I spent so much time there. Both of my parents were Ole Miss grads, and spent so much time there as a kid. Had a sibling that went there as well, to Ole Miss, and I think there's just something really special about that town.
The Velvet Ditch, they call it.
Why do they call it that?
I think because it's such a center for, and this is this podcast talks primarily about music, but one of the great things about Mississippi, and I would argue one of the reasons that Mississippi is the birthplace of American music, is also because of how rich a history Mississippi has in literature. And if you look just at Oxford, nowhere else, you have tie-ins to Willie Morris, you have tie-ins to John Grisham and Donna Tartt, and even an author, but who was also known to be a friend to Tom T. Hall, the great Will D. Campbell from Amite County. He was a former professor at Ole Miss. So I think that's a great choice. Maybe I'll go down to Square Books, get you
Exactly. Yeah. I'm a huge John Grisham fan too. And I remember as a kid driving past his house in Oxford on the way to football games at Ole Miss, and he had built a baseball field in his backyard for his kids. And I just used to think that was the coolest
Oh,
thing
man,
in the
you've
world.
won the parent lottery.
Like a
of-
legitimate baseball field.
a
in
real
his
baseball.
backyard.
Wow, that's high cotton, as they would say.
I'm ready. I'll go whenever you're.
Hey, another, I left out the actual, probably perhaps biggest star in literary world from Oxford, of course, William Faulkner. And I think part of the whole reason for me doing this podcast is based on the philosophy of something William Faulkner said, which is if to understand America first you need, or understand the world really, first you need to understand a place like Mississippi. So with all of that, Jordan, can you answer this question, which to me is a long answer to give, but what is it specifically about Mississippi that makes it the birthplace of American music? I know, Dan, you mentioned earlier, we carry with us where we're from, and I think that's a big part of it. But for you specifically, what would you say is the reason? What is it?
I think it's the influence on so many genres of music today. Yeah. When you look at Elvis, right?
Played on the Opry, which I want to ask you about it.
When you look at Elvis, when you look at Sam Cooke, when you look at Jimmy Rogers, and you look at all the influence of the blues and what it had on artists like the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin or even Elvis himself, and then you see how that thread got woven through all the generations since of music. I mean, you can really take it back to that music from Mississippi, the influx of plantation slavery, the songs that were being sung there, and the mix of that with the Southern folk and everything that came out as a byproduct of that. It still very much permeates American culture when it comes to music today. So I think that's really why.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think part of it's like what you said, so much of that history is still kind of hanging around. And when you're at a magical place like the Opry with such a rich history, you can feel that in a way that I feel every time I cross the state line into Mississippi. So you mentioned Elvis, and this is a question for you, Dan, because I'm such a fan of how you steer the ship of the Opry. And I'm very aware of one of the challenges putting on the Opry each week is that you have to appeal to a pretty broad audience. And behind that curtain, you have to make room for a pretty wide range of talent and entertainment. And, historically back in 1954...
You make it sound so easy.
Well, it's not.
really
That's the point I'm trying to drive home. It isn't so easy. And case in point, in 1954, Elvis Presley had become this massive sensation, and it would have been a big moment for the Opry to get such a big name. Right now, in our 100th year at the Opry, we are in a different mindset where we're, bring Ringo Starr on, bring these people on from around the world and from outside our world. But in the 50s and at the Ryman that night that Elvis performed, he also represented a sort of scary change in culture. And it wasn't a performance that went well for him, but the Opry endures and the Opry evolves. And I'm just curious about how you approach that challenge of appealing to such a broad range of people and accommodating such a broad range of artists?
The first thing I think to say is I think at 100, it becomes a little bit more about we feel honored that a Ringo Starr, he could be anywhere.
Sure.
And that he wanted to come be a part of what we do. And I think the audience, for the most part, feels that way too. Like, as an Opry fan, they feel validated, hopefully, that a Ringo, and then hopefully, household name after household name comes through. Because in 2025, some of the biggest names in music have been influenced by, who knows, their favorite country artists. And I think these days it just differs a little bit. As I've read all the Elvis reports I can, no one truly knows exactly what happened that night. And in my mind, maybe it was just people said basically that it was polite applause, that it wasn't like babies thrown in the air and that sort of thing. And maybe that alone was just a little bit of a letdown. I also appreciate that, as I understand it, Bill Monroe went out of his way to say he appreciated Elvis's take on Blue Moon of Kentucky.
Those powerful checks. I remember them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I've always heard as well that as Elvis was exiting the Ryman, that he got a very warm embrace from Ernest Tubb and an invitation to go sing on the second longest running radio show of all time, the Midnight Jamboree, which is country music's, first official after party after the good-natured riot that is the Opry. Well, before y'all get out of here, one thing I did want to ask, this is specific to you, Jordan. It's something I'm going to ask each guest that comes on, and that is, who's on your Mississippi Mount Rushmore?
All right, so I came up with a little bit of two lists here. I've got the classic list. Okay, here's the classic list: Robert Johnson, Jimmie Rodgers, Charley Pride, B.B. King, Muddy Waters, and Elvis Presley.
Okay,
kind of hard to
We're
top
carving
that.
a couple extra faces in there, and that's all right. It's hard to squeeze them all in.
And then in a semi more modern way, we're gonna go Randy Houser,
Yeah.
Britney Spears,
Okay.
Hardy,
Yeah.
R.L. Burnside, Conway Twitty.
All right.
So
No Charlie Worsham. I see how it is.
yeah,
No, I kid.
You're heavy in my rotation. Even
Oh,
still
dude,
to this
I'm just
day.
giving you a hard time. Those are all great. And I love seeing Hardy have success. I love the camaraderie between him and Marty Stewart, specifically sharing those roots in Philadelphia. And it's just proof that this legacy continues on. And you guys are a big part of that legacy. Obviously, I'm partial to the Mississippi part of it, but the Opry is so dear to me. And it's just been a part of my life and my family's life. We talked about Mike Snyder earlier. He literally is the reason I play music today. We came up to Opryland, saw him perform on the Opry. I went all the way up to Nashville from Grenada.
Wasn't it Mike that you played banjo with when you were 12?
Just a few short years later. So I went up to Nashville begging for a guitar, and my mom, I guess maybe was a little bit nervous, thinking the guitar might lead to the earrings and the tattoos or whatever, which ended up happening anyway. But man, Mike played that banjo, and I was just transfixed. So the whole way home, it was, Mom, can I please get a banjo? Can I please get a banjo? And so I did. And then a few short years later, made my Opry debut, thanks to Mike. I remember it fondly.
I'll never forget taking you around and introducing you to radio stations and stuff, and us playing that EPK video of yours and showing you as a 12-year-old on that Opry stage playing banjo.
Introduced by Porter Wagner from those TNN days.
And he got it right? He got the name
he
right?
Actually,
That doesn't
he
always
got
happen.
it right. Well, he didn't have to say my name. They were coming out of a Louvin Brothers segment, or excuse me, Everly Brothers segment. And he pitched it to the next person, Roxanne
Russell, yeah.
Roxanne Russell. He said, all right, Roxanne, somebody's going to take that same path of being young and singing and music. He goes, take it away, But it was pretty cool because he had his purple suit with all the rhinestones. And that reminds me that our friend Marty Stewart after the flood, y'all did a great renovation of the Grand Ole Opry, and that's my favorite dressing room. Is
It's a good one.
the Wagon Master, which was traditionally Porter's room, that Marty Stewart redesigned.
Has Marty's Mississippi stamp all over that.
Yeah, if you ever at the Opry, get an Opry tour.
And I'll say,
check it out.
Charlie, you said, the Opry's important to you, and you are incredibly important to the Opry as well. You've got just so many great moments with you on that stage, and hope that they continue for the rest of my tenure there and the rest of your life in Nashville, Tennessee.
Man, I hope so too. And I'm so grateful that y'all are here today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thanks for having us, Charlie.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much.
Mississippi on the Map is made possible by Visit Mississippi. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to be the first to know about new episodes when they drop.